Yes, sir. You are
Okay,
on.
great. All right, so I would like to call to order the regular meeting of the Finance Committee of July 19th, 2021 at 5 p.m. Can I have a roll call, please?
Yes, you can. Counselor Cassett,
Here.
Counselor Villarreal,
Present.
Counselor Lindell,
Here.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Here.
and Counselor Beta.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. The next item is approval of the agenda. Is there any changes from staff to the agenda?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, changes from the committee. Can I have a motion regarding the agenda?
Second.
Okay, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
and Counselor Beta.
Yes. Okay, so the agenda has been approved. Next is approval of the consent agenda. Items to be pulled from the consent agenda. Counselor Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. Item C and item E.
Other items from the committee. Can I have a motion regarding the consent agenda as amended?
Move to approve as amended. Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended. The amendments are the withdrawal of items C and E. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
and Counselor Beta.
Yes. Okay, so that's the consent agenda has been approved as amended. Next is approval of the minutes. This is the regular Finance Committee meeting of July 6th, 2021. Are there any changes from staff?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, changes from the committee. Is there a motion regarding the minutes?
Move to
Move
approve.
to Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Beta.
I'll recuse myself since I wasn't at this meeting. Okay, so the minutes pass. Our first item is 6, a presentation, internal audit update, and we'll be discussing public utilities. Before we get started, I just want to remind the committee that this is something that we talked about probably 3 years ago doing as a finance committee, having as a result of the McCard report, I think is we said we would start doing our own internal audits of different areas we were concerned with so that we can identify problems up front if there are any. We don't want to, not only as a governing body, but especially as a finance committee, to wait for an external audit to identify things that we may be able to catch and correct prior to an external audit. And this first area that we're getting a report on is public utilities. I'd like to recognize and thank Chairwoman Woodruff from our audit committee. Thank you for joining us and also for helping us oversee and make sure these internal audits are done. So who's going to start with the presentation?
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair Beta. Good to see everyone. Council members, hope everyone's doing well and staying safe. Thank you once again for having us on tonight. And that is correct. We, the team, REDW, who is our co-sourced, outsourced internal audit function, will be presenting the internal audit, the completed internal audit of the utilities billing internal audit that we performed. We kicked that audit off in end of December, January timeframe. We wrapped that up the end of March. That audit report was submitted in April. And we are then, the second internal audit, then moving forward, then we kicked off an internal audit of the IT department. And that is going well. We just did an exit conference, 2 weeks ago now. That audit report, very well done. That's going to be coming out here, I think, next month, if I remember. And then along with that, the third internal audit that we are currently performing is an internal audit of the police evidence room, which has been, once again, an excellent internal audit, looking at all the risk and making sure that we're in compliance with some of the issues that were noted. That internal audit's going really well also. We anticipate that internal audit will be wrapped up and will be submitted also in the September timeframe. So, given the amount of issues, once again, still with COVID that we've been dealing with, given some of the challenges with the external audit that we have been, I personally have been, providing assistance and running point on that with CLA. I think overall, we have a really good team, and we are feeling really confident that we will continue to improve this process. And I just want to make sure that everybody tonight understands that every single person, from utilities to the police department to the IT department, they've all been very positive to this process. There was a little bit of pushback in the beginning, obviously, but I think with the mayor's leadership and with council, they all understand the value. They are now really, I think, embracing the concept of internal controls and what this means and how this can help them. So I have been very pleased, considering where this function was 3 years ago when I came on board. So light years ahead, still a lot of work to do, but I think we have the right team in place. And once again, I want to thank you for your continued support. And I will turn it over to Caitlin to kind of kick off, and we'll go through just kind of high level, because there's a lot of issues with the utilities billing division, but feel free to ask any questions if needed. So
Perfect.
go ahead.
Hello, everybody. I have myself, Kate Gutierrez. I'm the internal audit manager with RIDW, and then Jessica Bundy here as well, who is the partner over the internal audit area. Thank you guys for having us and letting us present our observations from the internal audit over public utilities. Bear with me, I have a cold today. Beauty of the world opening back up. It's been a lot of fun. Would you guys all prefer I share my screen and have the report up, or do you have it in front of you? Share screen, I'm guessing. Okay, perfect. Give me one moment. Okay, can everybody see that successfully?
Yes, I believe so.
Great. Okay. So real quick overview, when we did this internal audit, we specifically wanted to look at billings and collections, customer account adjustments, systems access, cash collection and deposits, as well as the overall account collection process to make sure, those things are being performed in compliance with policy and procedure, relevant city code, and any applicable law and regulation. So that really was where.
Sorry to interrupt you. This is Councilor Villarreal. Is there a way to increase the screen?
Sure. I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So that was really where our focus was. I know it sounds very concise with, the way we wrote it, but it really was a very big audit. We went a lot of places. So as a result of our testing, and like Stephanie said, we'll go very briefly through these because there's quite a bit to get through. So please stop me with any questions. The first area was the contractor reliance with outdated software. So the utilities division has been using this contractor for about 15 years. And there's a heavy reliance on this contractor. And largely that's due to a very outdated system in place that really needed to get updated. And this contractor had a lot of institutional knowledge with that system. And so what resulted was the contractor was performing a lot of duties that really should have been performed by city employees. And as you can see, the city was expending quite a substantial amount of money towards their invoices for this process. Also, when we looked at the contract, they should have been training city employees. We found that they really hadn't developed that training plan to try and pull back some of that reliance. So really the root cause here was that system needed to get updated. So we had put this as a high risk, saying basically, you know, move this through approval, get it done, and then start pulling back on that reliance once that transfer of information occurs. The good news here is that new system has already been approved and implementation has already started. So we anticipate that this will really start to, we'll see this like reliance start to pull back as they work through this implementation. As anybody that's been through a software implementation knows, it takes some time. So we're looking at least probably 18 months before we see, you know, some of that positive transfer of information from this. But that's basically the gist of this one. Any questions?
No, thank you. I think we're all familiar with this. In fact, what we've been told by the department over and over is we're actually on like a 14-month timeline. So, but this is
Even
something
better.
that we are all familiar with and has continued to raise concerns with, but the department seems to be pretty responsive. And as you said, we have a plan in place.
Perfect. Good. Excellent. So the next one, I think, is probably another area you guys are very familiar with, so I won't spend a ton of time here, but just the implementation delays that we found, you know, that they had identified the system they wanted, and it just hit a lot of roadblocks trying to get it implemented. And so as a result, you know, this old system that's just so archaic was just sticking the whole time. Again, this one's pretty much resolved itself with the approval of the new billing system. So we're confident that this one's well on its way. Again, this sounds like an area you guys are very aware of occurring. So, okay. Next area was customer account adjustments. So this is any time that a customer is requesting, you know, something be changed, there's a billing error that's been identified, or when an account's closed. And what we found here was that, you know, really there weren't transaction level capabilities in the old billing system. So what we found was any employee could initiate an account adjustment and also process the adjustment. So a major segregation of duty issue here. And then what we also found was when we did our sample, 2 had missing documentation and 1 was done incorrectly. So we put this as high mainly because of that segregation of duties issue. Again, with that new billing system, it should allow for better segregation of duties at the transaction level. So we're hoping once that implementation occurs, the division's able to go in, set up proper controls over this area to make sure that the person that initiates also can't process those account adjustments, and we should see this one hopefully resolve itself. Questions on this one? Okay. The next one was a pretty big one. So there's a lot of software that's utilized in the utilities division, and we focused on what we felt were the 4 main risk software. So we didn't test every single system used, but we looked at these 4 ones, the UCIS, Paymentus, Beacon, and then the banking platform that's used. And what we did was we pulled systems access reports and said, okay, is system access appropriate for job title and function? And also, are they managing that systems access appropriately? So, you know, when somebody leaves the city, are they terminating access timely? You know, things like that. As you can probably see when you looked at the report, there's an enormous amount of detail here. I will not go through each line item. But what essentially we found was that basically there weren't good controls over systems access. They weren't monitoring to make sure that admin access was appropriate, that people should have admin access. Terminations from accounts systems weren't occurring timely. So there was a lot of non-compliance with the access policies in place for the city. And we found that pretty much trending across all 4 of the systems we tested. So we did put this at high. Naturally, you know, systems access is kind of a big deal. And just, you know, really recommended that implementation of compliance with that computer access control policy. We brought IT into this one as well to make sure that they were aware of this happening. As Stephanie said, we're going through an internal audit on that one as well. So then we projected this issue citywide to say, okay, we saw it in utilities, what's happening now at a city level? And I anticipate IT will be implementing a lot of changes with this one, with department collaboration in the coming fiscal year. So once we are ready to present IT, we'll touch more on this one at this point. At that point, excuse me. Questions on this one? Okay. Next area was customer write-offs. So, anytime an account goes into delinquency, there's a statute that basically says that for after 4 years, the account is deemed uncollectible. If reasonable attempts to collect have been made, get rid of it. And what we found that there was only one write-off that had been completed since 2017 for about 2.69 million. And a subsequent write-off is pending approval for 2021, which includes amounts from 2013 through 2020. So what happened here as a result is you've had bad debt sitting in AR for longer than it should, and it impacts the financial statements. We also found that there aren't policies and procedures over this. They're in draft form. They've been that way since 2013, and they do not reflect current practice. So we put this one at high as well, just because of the impact to the financial statements, and had recommended in collaboration with finance to update and finalize those PMPs, put a process in place, a very standardized process so that this can happen annually. Also, we had recommended when they go out, and we're looking at that new billing system to make sure it had the capabilities that it can track AR aging and things so they can estimate bad debts better. Those two departments are working together to get this standardized, get good templates in place, make sure that this does not happen again. And they are also looking at those software capabilities to see how it can help track these as well. So, questions? Okay. Next one is actions to collect and the write-off adjustment. So again, back kind of to these collections in AR. What we found here was that prior to 2017, collection efforts were largely non-existent. Then things were put in place. We hit 2020, a moratorium was put in place for all of those non-payments thanks to COVID. And what we found here was that, essentially those moratoriums are going to lift, and there was no plan in place for collection efforts once that moratorium is lifted. So the concern here is now those balances have gotten very large, and there's no plan to really go out and start collecting on them again. So our recommendation here was just, again, making sure that that policy that's in place is updated, it's reflective of current practice, that those attempts start occurring again to collect, and that those attempts are documented, because that was another area, was kind of the documentation was sometimes hit or miss. So the department will be working on current procedures for that collection, the 2-day notices, turn on off procedures. That's going to get approved by the end of fiscal 22. The new billing system will also have should have a good reporting functionality to really help with this process and the tracking of it. So that should be a really positive impact from that new system as well. Okay, next one is cash handling. So there is a separate cashiering function that is an arm of the city cashier's office. There are policies over that. There's also state statute that governs how cash is to be collected and held. Excuse me. What we found here was that the city policy that is in place has not been updated since it was put in place. We also found that there were not appropriate controls regarding end of shift cash balancing and drawer reconciliations. And specifically with that was that states that the cash count should always be performed in the presence of the individual responsible for the cash and by somebody not responsible, and reconciled by somebody independent of the cashiering and cash count functions when possible. And we did not always see that was happening within the presence of the appropriate people. We also found for 9 of the 40 deposits that we tested, state statute requires that these are deposited within 24 hours of receipt, and we found 9 of 40 that had not met that time frame. We did put this at moderate, and our recommendations here, we're just updating that policy, to make sure it's reflective of current practice, state statute, et cetera. Making sure that they're following the policy with the appropriate staffing, making sure, that there's those dual controls in place over the cash counts, things like that. Utilities is already working with the finance department to make sure that those pickups are done daily, and have put procedures in place for when it can't be performed by the pickup truck, that they'll take it to the bank or some other alternate procedure to ensure compliance. They're working on that segregation of duty issue as well over the cash counts. So already a lot has been done to look at this one and put those proper controls in place. So next area is orphan and legacy accounts. So the UCIS billing system, there are several accounts where there's a receivable but no utility account, and that's known as an orphan account. Or there are accounts that were transferred from an old system, and that's the legacy account. These are about 200,000 and 130,000 respectively, and these have been sitting on AR since 2001 at least. Again, this is impacting financial statements because there's really nothing the city can do about them. But they're sitting in AR like they're collectible, and they really aren't. So our recommendation here was reviewing them, getting a detailed list pulled together, and getting them written off and off the books so that AR, there's really that true balance in AR. Those two departments are working together to identify those, get that listing, get those off the books, and get that done for good. I promise we're almost done. Next one is unallocated funds and customer refunds. So what we found here, that whenever you start utility services, that security deposit is required to start those services. It's then held in a trust account, at which point when you close the service, typically that's refunded. There were several accounts which existed prior to 2003 where that deposit is still sitting in that trust account, despite several attempts to issue a refund. Unfortunately, at the time that these accounts became accounts, there were not procedures to collect Social Security numbers or all the required information to transfer it to New Mexico unclaimed property. So unfortunately, the department has been kind of stuck in what to do with them. So they just kind of continue to sit there in this account. We also found that a stale dated check report has not been produced in over a year. So there's a high likelihood that many accounts that were issued refunds need to be reversed and voided to place the credit back on the account since that check never technically cleared. So we recommended that the division work with unclaimed property to say, hey, we're never going to have this information. What do we do? To try and start getting some ideas of like, what's the process to get these taken care of and off the books. So they're going to work with the various departments, relevant departments, as well as the unclaimed property section to try and get these back to customers. And also put targeted policies addressing how these funds should be handled so this does not happen again. Next one is billing cycle checklist. So every month they have a checklist that they use to make sure all the various, billing cycle pieces occur. And one of those areas is, determining if potential variances exist in the billing data, such as a missed meter or things like that. And we found here was 4 of the 12 months tested. The number of adjustments recorded for the billing cycle were not noted on the checklist, nor was the adjustment listing attached. We also found an absence of policies again in this area to make sure, if there's a missed meter reading, we have 48 hours to resolve it to ensure the billing cycle continues on time. So we did put this at low just because that checklist is really a powerful control and is working pretty well. And just recommended implementation of policies over this process to make sure that the procedures and policies are clear here. Response here was that they'll continue to add to that current billing checklist and put these into formal policy by the end of fiscal 22. And that's it. Those are our observations. So any questions?
Questions, Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe if you can stop sharing the screen, that'd be helpful.
Sure.
So this stuff exhausts me. I feel like we've been through this so many times that it's just like, it's excruciating to keep hearing about it. And it's not just even a McCard report. It's just like things that we see as counselors as we see these contracts come up, especially the contractor reliance one that reaffirms and justifies my concerns, and as well as Councilor Lindell. I think we've been like hitting our head against the wall for years. It's exhausting. And so I'm just trying to figure out, well, for one, I had a question. The recommendation or their response from staff said, oh, we're gonna complete this in 14 months. But the last conversation we had was 18 months. So it's this moving target. And so I'm wondering, I don't even know who can answer this. Like, what are we gonna be doing? Because it keeps changing. And we know that we need to get off contractor reliance and make sure that our internal staff knows how to do this work and capable staff that are able to do this. So I'm just wanting to understand that the changes and then how we can kind of keep that accountable.
So
Yeah.
we have a very, Stephanie, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll just make a high level comment. I mean, excellent comments, and I don't have a lot of the history, but your statement is spot on. And I bet that if you looked at every area within the city, there's probably a reliance on several contractors, right? So I think since this is really the first formal internal audit where this is documented, now this is a formal report where we will be following up. Now this is a public record. I think there's more accountability. But I think what you're exactly saying, what you're exactly explaining is really a change management process and really holding people accountable, right, for several issues. So yeah, I mean, that's I don't know who can answer that or what the answer is. But I think that same thing that we saw, I think with IT and probably with the police report coming down the road, where people are finally seeing that, oh my God, this is now something, a tool, internal audit. Now this report is a tool to either get us more resources, get us more staff, get us the priority that we need, right? So I think there hasn't been that, that tool. I mean, McCard was a 35-page report that was a massive tool, right? But it was, no one really took it and really held anybody, I'll be honest with you, no one really took it and held anybody accountable for it. And then everybody in the McCard report is pretty much gone. And then that was prior administration, now the new administration. And I give the mayor credit. I mean, he is totally on board now with a lot of these difficult issues. And that's why we were able to kick off the police evidence room audit. Very political, right? A hot potato. But they see the risk and they understand the value. So, I implore you guys to really take these reports or these items, somehow weave them back in through HR or a PNP process to start holding people accountable. Because you're exactly right. We can have these issues over and over again. Oh, that was going to be 18 months. Now it's 14 months. Or, I need another $1 million for this contractor. And, and of course, COVID, the last 16 months hasn't helped, right? We don't know the impact of that, but you're exactly right. I mean, it's a change management process here at the same time.
It is, and I mean, I think even prior to the McCard report, we're talking about systemic problems and actually not even villainizing individuals, administration.
Culture. It's just the culture.
It's really about also providing the resources and tools that staff can use to be successful. And so we have let that go on for a long time. And, we kind of continue in some aspects with that too. So it's good that we have an audit to kind of hone in on those pieces. I guess what I'm wanting more of is root causes so that we don't go back and revert to those issues. You can outline certain things that would be helpful for us, but I think just looking at systemic root causes so that we can prevent those from occurring in the future. So that's just really a statement. I just feel like there's things that we
No,
need.
it's excellent comments. I mean, and what you just described is exactly why the external audit for the state auditor, right, has been delayed and had continued to be delayed because of the systematic issues that, I mean, these issues go back decades, right? So you had those issues, and then you had this system-wide, the ERP implementation, which had a lot of its hiccups, and the way that it was implemented by people who, the decisions that were made, we are now cleaning those decisions up, right? Whether they did certain things to combine certain chart of accounts or whatever. So it's been really hard So I mean, the staff is they are busting their butts. Like they are working so hard to get it right. And I as an outsider, I mean, this is my outside opinion. And honestly, I don't have a horse in the race here, right? I am completely from the outside. I don't get paid to do this. I'm an independent director. But what I saw 3 years ago versus now, night and day, right? Night and day in terms of getting the right people in place, getting the processes, getting the systems, getting the support is night and day. And I have complete confidence that as we continue this process, it's only going to get better. I just do. And what the city of Santa Fe is dealing with is really no different. I mean, I have a 30-year career doing this. I spent many years at Deloitte and all over the world. This is no different, right? This is no different than what other organizations or municipalities, and I played this role in the city of Minneapolis. You know, you want to talk about, you know, a mess, let's talk about Minneapolis. But, you know, so it's no different, but it's still a challenge and it's frustrating. But I feel confident that we have the right people in place, and with the patience and the education and a change management process, that the city of Santa Fe will only make those improvements and we'll get there down the road. So that's my 2 cents.
Well,
Anyway.
I appreciate your optimism. Caitlin, add to that.
Yeah, you know, definitely you mentioned root cause. And I think that's one of the things that Jessica and I value very much is anytime we're doing an audit, we're looking for root cause. We want to know where is that pain point? And I think here that billing system really was a huge pain point. So that's kind of piece one. I think that new billing system really is going to help to see a lot of these systemic changes reverse. The other piece I want to mention is part of our internal audit process. And it was not part of it this past year just because this was such an infant process for the city as a whole, but we do a follow-up process where we go back in and we say, hey, you had these observations. What's your status? What progress have you made? What controls have you put in place? And we don't resolve these until we're confident that there are proper high-level controls in place to address the problem, or the system got implemented, or the PMP got written and approved. And so that is something that we're going to be getting off the ground here with the city, probably, I don't think this fiscal year, but the next one, we'll start that process of then going back in and then communicating that back to you guys and saying, hey, here's what they're telling us, so that you can take action if you need to. And you're getting that information instead of it just being another report that gets shelved and nobody looks at it.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like there needs to be something to retrace or go back to these recommendations, because even just what you had described about cash handling, that was something that was flagged in other departments, which should have then flagged other departments to be like, hey, we need to get on track with that particular issue of cash handling, yet you're still bringing up an issue about collections and deposits, and we had those issues in other departments. So that's a little frustrating because I feel like we're not learning from other departments, getting flagged for certain things, processes, not necessarily blaming individuals, but just not having a policy and procedure for staff to follow. So I'm just trying to figure out how we circle back to make sure these things are getting implemented, because we can't track this as counselors. I can't like keep knocking on doors of individuals or staff people and say, hey, where is this at? Where is this at? I mean, look at this report. It's long. And so I'm just wondering, what management, did you all come up with like a strategy for trying to do benchmarks where we're, you know, checking things off as we go, or some kind of strategy or plan? I don't know what that looks like.
We did not. I mean, we tried to put in our recommendations what we tried to do there is break it down as granular as we could, to kind of say, start here, then go here. So that was kind of what we did. And then just tried to help not guide the response from management, but just kind of helped build them reasonable action plans, you know, because I think the initial response is always, we're going to fix it all tomorrow. And it's like, you guys have to, this is an elephant and you have to piece it out, you know, slowly. And so we really tried to work with them to help build them reasonable timeframes. And I think they got there. You know, ideally we would check in, quarterly on these and give you more frequent updates, but our audit plan doesn't allow based on our hours. And so yeah.
If we had more money in the budget, we could do more.
Right. We do amazing things. But no, I do, I feel confident with the department that with that new system, they were already aware of this and they were already like, it sucks. We don't enjoy working like this. And so I think that new system is going to be really positive for them. I think they're very excited about it. I think they're very eager to turn this around. So I feel good I'm being optimistic that it's going to be, a positive step forward. And like I said, when we kind of start implementing that follow-up process, then we can, provide that feedback to you of saying, hey, here is how it's going for real.
Right.
And then we do limited testing and you guys can see that progress or
Well,
lack
and
of progress.
That follow-up and those benchmarks, I mean, that's really what drives the ongoing risk assessment every year. So when we step back and we say, okay, look at all these, the business processes, and we put them on a cycle based upon risk, right? So utilities, IT, police were some of the top ones that came up this year. Next,
mean by
HR. What's that?
Risk to the city being sued, risk to the
So financial risk, operational risk, and compliance risk. So that those are broad. I mean, under that there are several, detailed statements under that. But at a high level, financial risk, operational risk, compliance risk. So yeah, being sued is one of them. But as we do these audits and we get more data, then that's going to drive the overall risk assessment process. So you can kind of step back and look at all of the business, the business processes within the city, and you can start to kind of see kind of a dashboard and have the benchmarks to say, okay, we have a proper coverage of public utilities, public safety, financial reporting, or whatever all the big buckets are, HR, payroll. But that takes time to kind of build that, right? And you put it on this dashboard, kind of a red, yellow, green, and then you can kind of, then the areas just kind of jump out at you on the page. And then you can take those and then drive that down into the organization to start really holding people accountable and really start to formalize more of this process. But it takes a long time. I mean, it's just all data, it's data driven. Right. You have a lot of data, you have a lot of in your head saying, oh, these areas, they always come up, always, always, always. How come nothing changes? Well, if there's no accountability, if there's no really dashboard, if there's no really, no one's really forcing anybody to change, then they're always going to come up, So this is a big part of, that's why it's called internal audit. We are your internal kind of internal consultants. What I always tell the mayor and everybody that, our existence is truly here to try to keep the city out of the paper, right? We want to keep you off the front page of the paper. We are your eyes and ears in the field. And I wasn't joking when I said if we had more money, I mean, our budget is so small and limited, but if we had more, we could do more, where it's more on that ongoing monitoring and to try to stay ahead of a lot of these issues.
Well, I think it's just making sure, because we have changes in staff frequently, and that there needs to be some way to document it or follow it, track it. So I guess I'm just wondering, is that the city manager? Because when we don't have directors that, maybe consistently stay in their positions, then
that would be the city manager.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking
kind of a global view of, for sure.
So that's just thing that I want to continue talking about with our city manager, because if it falls on directors or other supervisors, then there may be it may get lost, I guess, is what I'm hoping it doesn't happen. But so I have one more question. You were talking about orphan and legacy accounts and customer write-offs, and I was curious if you came across issues with accounts that were related to old liens. And there were accounts that were not paid. There were, say they were payments in arrears for utilities of people that no longer are connected to a property. And I've run into a situation with a couple residents trying to buy a home, that home that had a lien on it. And there was not a very clear policy and procedure of how we handle that. And I'm just curious if you all came across anything related to that, and if there's a way to ameliorate that, because it's not fair to somebody trying to buy a home and there's this lien of years. I'm talking about like 20 plus years, and they tell them, it's your responsibility, even though they had nothing to do with that account. So I don't know. Is there anything that you discovered through your process related to that topic?
It's ringing a bell. It's been a minute since we did the detail testing. So let me reach out to our senior, Allie. She couldn't make it today, and talk to her about that. And then I will get your email address and we can provide you with what we did see regarding that. But I do think regardless, that is definitely something that should be in those policies and procedures of how those accounts should be handled.
Yes.
So
I haven't seen anything written since these two issues came up. And so I'm just curious what we need to do to make sure that staff knows what they are able to do and what is required by law, and what are some things that, during a certain time period. I don't know what it is. I just feel like there's nothing out there in our policies and procedures that's clear for me and for the public.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's something that city legal could really assist with, and making sure that that's compliant. So,
okay.
Yeah, no, we'll get back to you on that for sure.
Excellent. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, other questions from the committee?
Mr. Chair,
Councilwoman Romero Worth.
thank you. Stephanie, I just want to thank you for your role and work. And thank you, of course, to our contract auditors. Yeah, I see this as a positive development, and an indication of how seriously we are taking the flags that were raised by the McCard report, and really trying to get our financial house in order. I mean, these are really big problems. These are not things that are solved with, a resolution or a, couple quick policies. I mean, this is really big stuff. And so I just want to thank you all for your work on this, and then express my gratitude that and acknowledge that this is a sign that we are trying to get our financial house in order and really do the work that needs to be done to fix these really long-standing problems. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for those kind words. I appreciate that.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councilor Villarreal, for giving me a few minutes to cool down a little over the questions that you ask. I probably wouldn't have asked them so well, and they aren't specifically asked of you women. It's just more of the frustration of this tape drives me crazy. It's like an earworm to me. We've heard it and we've heard it and we've heard it. But this is what I'll say is I've never felt as positive as I do right now that we're making progress on this. I think that we have the right people working on this. I think you have an understanding of the complexities of it, and that, we can pound the table all day long and kick the dirt about it, but it's just really hard work that no one previously has done. And I'm really, really grateful to you. Stephanie, it's a volunteer seat that you sit in. Your better judgment is forever suspect for doing that. We're most grateful to you. And I just so hope that we can continue to make progress on this. It's been an extremely frustrating topic for a very long time.
Yeah.
But I feel like we're making progress now, and that we have the right team put together, and that they know what problem we're trying to solve. And it's been well identified. So thank you very much. Thank you for letting me speak, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Cassette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much to our presenters. I think that my colleagues have all said what needs to be said in terms of both the frustration as well as the kind of a little bit of hopefulness that we are moving in the right direction. I think maybe this is a question more for this finance committee, and Councilwoman Villarreal brought up one of my biggest questions as I was reading this report is, okay, now what? And how do we make sure that we're staying on track? And I think that that is a larger conversation that we need to be having, whether it is looking at your contract and whether we want to be expanding that or having this conversation with the city manager. But that's something that I'm very concerned about, is how do we make sure that we are really tracking our progress here? And again, thank you very much, Councilwoman Villarreal, for that conversation. And I know the city manager is not here right now, but I'm sure that she'll, and I'm obviously we have opportunity to speak with her, but I think that that is a bigger conversation that we need to receive a proposal from the city manager on really how this is going to be tracked, because as has been pointed out, these are really deep systemic issues. There's a lot of layers that we need to go through, and we as counselors cannot, even this is just public utilities. This is one of many departments that we are going to be going through this process with, and that we need to be going through this process with, and looking at where the cross issues are among departments, that if we're seeing something in one department, knowing that it is going to be showing up in another as well. So that's something that I'm sure the city manager will be able to discuss with her. I'm sure she'll get the message, but I do think that we as a council need to make sure that not just is this audit in place, but we have to be discussing about what is the plan. Do we want to be allocating dollars to increase the contract, or is this something that needs to be happening internally? And that's, I think, the piece that I am really concerned about and really want to make sure is moving forward, that we are keeping our finger on that pulse. So thank you, Ms. Woodruff. I appreciate you kind of putting this in context for us, because I know that as I was reading this, kind of the heart palps start coming and of like, oh my gosh. So I do appreciate the context that we are not necessarily alone in this. It does not in any way, shape, or form diminish the importance of addressing these things. But I do think that it is helpful to know that there have been other municipalities that have really had to clean this up. There's expertise, there's methods for how we move forward with this. And I do appreciate very much your guidance, as well as Ms. Gutierrez and Ms. Bundy on continuing to move forward. So thank you so much for this work. And I'm also very happy to hear, and I'm glad that you shared with us how hard staff is working, and that, they're focused there. And I do really appreciate you highlighting that as well. I think that that's really important to recognize that staff also sees that this is important, and they are working hard to identify solutions and address these issues and address these root causes. So that's all. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, so that concludes the internal audit update, the Public Utilities Department. Thank you. Okay, so that'll bring us to the items that were pulled from the consent calendar. The first is item C, which is a request for approval of a service agreement in the total amount of $1,444,526.87 to replace the Fort Marcy roof and skylights. First Mesa Construction Inc. Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. Who's here? Sam, it looks like you're here. Oh, it also looks like Karen's here. We had a little conversation about this previously at Public Works. Would one of you like to give an updated report on what we found out?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Lindell, I would be happy to do that. I reached out to the contractor. The manufacturer's warranty on the roofing material is 20 years, and that warranty is issued to the city after they've completed their inspection and made sure that there are no issues with the installation. The roofing installer, the roofing subcontractor, offers a 2-year warranty on their work. Typical in the industry is 1 year, so 2 years is very good. This is a well-regarded company, and I have heard from various sources that it is rare for their installations to have problems.
I appreciate that. You know, it's a little hard for me if I were to get a roof at my house, I wouldn't accept a 2-year warranty because I don't think it's the materials of the roofing that fail. I think that it's typically how the roof is installed that creates failure. And I'm really shocked that people accept a 1-year warranty on a roof. I would never accept that at my house. It's really hard for me to say yes to this because, we just did this not that long ago. We just put a roof, or we did roof repairs on Fort Marcy, and I doubt that the materials themselves failed. I think that it was probably an overpromised repair that, oh, we can repair this, and the technique or the craftsmanship or the workmanship didn't really give us what we needed. I mean, it failed in a fairly short amount of time. So why are roof warranties on what would be considered a commercial job? Why are roof warranties? Why do people accept a 1-year roof warranty? And you may not know. I mean, you're not the contractor. I get that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Lindell, talking with several, well, first from experience and second, reaching out to various contractors, 1- and 2-year warranties for us in the line of work we do, working on municipal projects. This really is the standard for us. Most contractors would offer a 1, maybe 2-year warranty on workmanship, and then longer warranties on the materials. We do have the option in some cases to request longer warranties from contractors to, for example, a 5 or 10-year warranty on a roof that costs a considerable amount of money. And based on our experience, for the most part, we are able to do projects like this, get a quality product installed correctly that has a reasonable lifespan. So we typically do not make that additional investment. But really across the board for us in kind of commercial construction, this is the the standard that we encounter kind of across the board in all disciplines. But I definitely understand your concerns, and I completely understand where you're coming from. And yeah, so that's what I have to offer.
So just for the fun of it, could you find out what it would cost, what the additional cost would be to have a 5-year or a 10-year warranty on this roof? I mean, this still has to come to council. I'm not trying to hold this up. I'm going to vote to move it forward, but I just would like to know what the additional cost on that is. And then we would have some idea if we thought that there was some cost benefit in that, in having that kind of a warranty.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Lindell, I will reach out to the contractor right away and ask them if they can find out what the cost would be for an additional warranty on it.
Okay.
And we'll have that information for you when it comes to the governing body.
Okay, or you could just send us an email in the interim.
I
That
would
would
be
be,
happy to do that.
that would be fine. And I appreciate the work on this, because we did talk about it at Public Works, and thanks for getting the additional information. I'll make a motion to approve.
Hang on, there's other hands up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to my other counselors. I didn't see them.
Okay, Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I share the same concerns with Councilwoman Lindell, mostly because I was trying to even track how long ago was the last roof replacement done? What year was that?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, the last work done on the roof at Fort Marcy was approximately 4 years ago. And the work done was actually not, there is a little bit of a differentiation. It was actually parapet and canale work that was done in conjunction with restuccoing of the building. There's been a few minor attempts to repair the roof over the natatorium over the years, but it was finally decided that the way the clear story was constructed was incorrect, and that really there were no repairs that would solve those problems. It really required a replacement. So that's been on a list in facilities. I'm not sure when it arrived on the list or was added to the list, but the entire 4.5 years I've been with the city, that has been one of the items, pending items for us.
Okay, I'm just, I guess I'm not so surprised about warranties as it relates to residential versus commercial. I mean, I have a 10-year warranty on my roof. And I'm just trying to figure out, like, who sets that standard? Or do they tell you that that's that standard? And we don't really have any way to compare it other than maybe locally. I'm just curious if other places, other municipalities have another kind of scenario. Not sure.
Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, I actually did do research online to try and see what the national standard was. And the national standard is 1 year in commercial construction. And again, with the opportunity of investing more money in a longer term warranty on that work.
Okay, so we would be looking into an extended warranty cost that Councilwoman Lindell suggested. I'm interested to see how much that would cost us, because maybe it actually is more affordable than replacing this 4 years from now. So hopefully that's not the case, but I'm just saying that I feel like we need some kind of way to I guess just uphold the contract. And so, and And this was a different company than the last roofing company we used to do the parapets and canales.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, yes, this is a different company. This is the same group of contractors that did the Montoya building skylight and roof a few years back. So I think we've got the right team on this time to do the job properly.
Okay. All right, well, I'll just look out for the additional information about an extended warranty. Thank you.
Other questions, Councilwoman Villarreal, or are you done?
I'm done, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councilwoman Cassette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sam and Karen, for being here. I had a quick question about, there was a mention in the packet about the pool having to close for a few weeks, pretty much over the holidays. And looking at other repairs that would need to be done at the same time. And I was curious if we had an idea of what those look like and if there are already dollars allocated to that. I'm bringing this up because there's been a lot of conversation about the Chavez Center and not relining the leisure pool, and a lot of people saying, well, why didn't you do it when it was closed? And I'm like, we need time and money. So I want to make sure that while we're creating the time that we also have the money allocated. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Chairman Abeyta, Councilor Cassett, we have some other repairs already under contract. And today in our staff meeting, we determined that some of the facilities maintenance repairs would be taken over on the project side to enable us to better coordinate all the work to minimize the number of closures we would need to make for this very important facility. We have had some discussion about potentially shifting this a little bit more to the spring, so that the facilities would be able to be open over the holidays, but as of yet, no determination's been made on that.
Okay, thank you. And are the facilities busier over the holidays? I would imagine that they would be quieter. I imagine there's no good time to close the pool, but I would be curious to look at the utilization numbers over the holidays versus over spring break, for example.
We'll definitely work with the staff at Fort Marcy to try and find the best possible time. It may be necessary to extend the closure a couple of additional weeks to take into account all the additional projects that we're going to try and accomplish during this closure. But I'm pretty confident that the skylight portion can be done in 6 weeks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate that you guys are really looking at coordinating this and decreasing the amount of closure time as much as possible. Obviously, it's important that we do the work. But coming off of the COVID year, I know that people are very sensitive to the pools closing, and we want to make sure that we're getting as much done at one time. So I really do appreciate that you guys already do have your eyes on that, and just want to make sure that we have allocated the dollars for it. So I think that that is something important for us to look at if we need to make budget adjustments to really decrease the number of time that the pool is closed. So thank you. That was all.
Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to the roof part again. So if I heard you correctly, the work that was done 4 years ago is different than the work that this contract will provide for. Did I hear that right?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, that is correct. The original work, or the work 4 years ago, was parapets and canales, and this work is the actual roof. And there is, surprising to many, a differentiation between canale and parapet work versus roof work. So kind of two separate specializations.
Okay, so who knows how long this will last, given that it's completely different. I mean, you would think longer,
Mr. Chair, Councilwoman, from our experience with a new roof, a new commercial roof of this type, we would expect to get a minimum of 20 years out of that roof with minor amounts of maintenance required. It's incredibly rare, I would imagine, throughout the industry to have a roof like this installed and have significant issues with it. I'm sure it happens at the city. I can only think of one instance where we had a roof that had any significant issues after it was installed. And even after the 1 year mark, the contractor returned to do work to make good on their promise to the city. So we're confident, although I understand, I don't want to diminish anybody's concerns. I think they're incredibly valid. We're confident that we would not run into any significant issues.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it would make sense if you're replacing the whole roof, it should last longer than the warranty. Although it does still beg the question, do you have any sense why commercial roofs are warranted less time than residential? Is there any? I mean, one would think that, all right, maybe in the first year that's, or if there's an extended warranty for a couple more, that's when you're most likely to see problems with the roof that are related to its installation and the materials versus, 20 years from now, when if it fails, it's our sun and our weather and that kind of thing. So really not on the manufacturer or the installation, but more of, just it being an old roof, right? So they shouldn't have to pay for that.
Correct, Mr. Chair, Councilwoman. Your logic is very strong and accurate. It's a common practice for us in a project like this to schedule what we call the 11-month walkthrough, where the contractor comes back. Together, we all inspect the roof. We look for any defects, any signs of anything failing, to ensure that we remain satisfied with the work they've done. And then, that's kind of the official end of the project. And, we kind of move from the warranty phase into the maintenance phase. And so far, that's worked well for us.
And then I guess, if we're going to look at an extended warranty, I think we have to look at the cost benefit of doing that, right? Is like, what's, how often, if you're going to have an issue, you're going to have it in the first year versus, carrying it out for 5 years, and also again, what does that cost and what's the likelihood that it'll fail in 3 years or what? So I don't know. There's some more, I guess, evaluation that would have to go into whether we really would want to spend the money on an extended warranty and what the experience says happens with these kinds of roofs. So, yeah. All right. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Lindell.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
and Counselor Beta.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is E, a request for approval of a contract amendment number 1 to the New Mexico Coalition to End Homelessness Early Intervention Project contract to extend the term of performance through June 30th, 2022, and increase the amount of compensation by $250,000 for a total contract amount of $430,000. Alexandra Ladd, Director of Office of Affordable Housing. Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. Just one very quick question. On page 11 of the packet, item C, report to the city on a quarterly basis the use of funds, including documentation of housing instability, AMI of assisted renter address, household size, and other demographic information as requested. First of all, do we get those reports? And for the next half year, could those be forwarded to us so that we could get a look at them?
Mr. Chair, good evening, and Councilman Lindell, good evening to you and the other members. Alex Ladd and I are both on vacation, and she is without internet tonight. So I'm going to ask Director Ochoa or Mr. Hank Hughes, who's here with the Coalition and Housing, to maybe answer that question, because I have the technical questions to answer from that standpoint. So I don't know if Director Ochoa could answer the question, or maybe Mr. Hughes could ask from a
Councilor Lindell, I'm sorry, Rich. I don't know the answer to that question. And I don't know if you're comfortable having the contractor answer the question, but I'd have to defer.
Yes, let's hear from Mr. Hughes.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
Mr. Hughes.
Well, thank you. And the answer is yes to both. I sign off on the quarterly reports, and I know that we're up to date on those. We don't list the people by their name. We just list initials to protect their privacy. Since there is that protection, I don't see any reason why the reports couldn't be shared with you all.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes, Commissioner Hughes. I would just, for the next two reports, I'd just like to have a look at them to get an idea of what the data looks like. And Mr. Brown, thank you for being on vacation and still getting into this Zoom meeting. And I hope that you can leave very, very shortly.
Thank you.
Councilman Abetha,
Yes, Ms. Dunaway.
and I was gonna answer Councilwoman Lindell as well and let her know, because that is the same question that I had. And I just wanted you to know that we do have those on file and we can get everything to you. And second, Mr. Hughes' answer, because he is correct, we have them.
Great.
Okay, because that's how we manage the contract. I just wanted to let you know.
I certainly appreciate it. And I can't really tell, Chair, if other people's hands are up. Part of my screen's cut off for some reason,
Yeah.
but
I didn't raise my hand, I'm sorry. I disappeared. I apologize.
Okay, because I'm ready to make a motion.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to see if staff could explain the difference between this contract and if it relates to the management of the Midtown shelter, or are these not connected?
Mr. Chair, Councilwoman Villarreal, I can take a stab at that. So they're separate contracts because the coalition employs separate staff, and in some cases not separate staff, but staff to perform these functions as outlined in the contract. And some of those staff have been connected to serving people who are housed in hotels. Some of them serve people at Midtown. So the location of the residence is flexible, as has had to be during this time period. And all the folks are helped with the rental assistance and the moving costs.
Okay, but go ahead.
Oh, Mr. Chair, Council Villarreal, item number F really pertains to the shelter, whereas this one is for the transitional housing. We needed the money to be nimble to get people into transitional housing, and we wanted to extend it to June 22 so we could have some time to do that. But item F is the one was for the contract for Midtown shelter.
Right, I guess I just want to be clear that in order to provide staff to do what they need to do with transitional housing for item E, there's also a piece that for that contract to be extended, they also would utilize the staff we're funding through E to support F, wouldn't it, for the Midtown shelter?
Mr. Chair, Councilman Villarreal, the contract is written as a deliverable-based contract. So I think, and Ms. Dunaway may be able to answer this with more detail on terms of the backup. And certainly Hank Hughes can answer how they structure that. We attempted in working with Alex on this. I know we talked about giving maximum flexibility given the sort of changing landscape of this in terms of allowing staff to work either from Midtown or in the field.
Okay. Someone else I don't know, Mr. Hughes or?
I saw Mr. Hughes with his hand up, but I will respond to exactly what Kara said. Yes, there is, there are two different scopes. So they are different contracts, and there's a lot more complexity to the Midtown than there is to the other ones. So they're two different scopes. So if that helps you.
Thank you. And Mr. Hughes, do you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, I think it might be just interesting to you that the main connection between those two, it's two different staffs that work on that because Consuelo's Place is a completely separate staff. And it's a different nonprofit entity under us. But the main connection will be that some of the money for the rental assistance will be used to help people move out of Consuelo's Place into permanent housing when those opportunities arise.
Excellent. That was what I wanted to hear. I know they're connected, not directly as related to the contract and the scope, but they are connected as it relates to supporting people in our community. Okay, so thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
and Counselor Beta.
Yes. Okay, so that item passes and that concludes the action items on our agenda. Item 8 is matters from staff. Is there anything from staff?
No matters from staff, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Brown, you're here. I thought I saw your hand go up. Did you
No, I
want
said thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, you're welcome. Okay, just making sure we didn't give you the opportunity to speak if you wanted to. Okay, matters from the committee. Anything from the committee? No, matters from the chair. I don't have anything. Our next meeting is Monday, August 7th, 2021. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.